welcome back, I hope, to the show Living with Climate Change. Today's show is going to look at how we can reduce our impact on the environment individually. But first, I want to talk about a little bit, respond to the last show, and then I want to share with you a very uplifting story about nature and how we can restore nature. So first, now I want to talk about the last show that I had, and I called it State of Our World. And I was trying to give a generalized look at how I think that the world has gotten better over the last 100 years. And despite our harsh impact on the environment that has led to climate change. And so there were some things that I want to talk about, especially with Africa. So I was talking about famine mainly and war and how these things have gotten so much better. And a part of the argument is that I think that the world will continue to get better. But let me, because I feel I need to talk about this, that I was talking about the major wars, and to me it seemed like the last horrible time in the world was during the Vietnam War, and there was a famine in Bangladesh, and then we had the killing fields in Cambodia. And I personally, I just think of that as the last really bad time in the world. But I overlooked this that I want to talk about now, about Africa, and how we can. Now, I said that the world has gotten better, and I think that Africa has been left behind in many ways. And the United Nations knows this, obviously. And that's why the number one goal in the Sustainability Development Goals is to end poverty. And that is mainly because of Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, not all the countries. So that is a bad thing that still is going on in the world. This Congo war was brutal, and they don't know the exact death toll, but maybe 5 million people. And it's called the African World War, and it really is considered the worst war since World War II. So I wanted to mention that, and I had just kind of forgot about it, just because, there's so many things to think about. But I did a book report called The Bottom Billion, on a book called The Bottom Billion in grad school by Paul Collier. And he did discuss what he called development traps, and the reason that Africa, many of the countries are having so much trouble to get out of poverty and quite horrible conditions. And it has to do with bad governance and maybe landlocked countries and resources and corruption and many things that are quite unique that, people have dedicated their lives to try to help Africa, and it continues to be a very serious problem. And there are other countries that are in this bottom billion. But I still, overall, like I said, 100 years ago, 75 million people were in poverty. And now, even though there's all this suffering, percentage-wise, you could say that, that's what, 15% of the world now in bad poverty. So Africa continues to struggle, and many other countries do. And I know there are many problems still in the world. And if we solved climate change, or we didn't have climate change, there would be problems, I imagine also. But I was, I say I forgot about Africa, but that's because I'm forgetful. But last year, I applied. I wanted to go to Africa and teach environmental education, and I spent weeks contacting universities in many of the countries that are English speaking, and I talked to some people through emails, and I applied to some universities and spent a long time on applications, but it never came through, and I didn't get a job. I wanted to go to Africa and see it. So anyway, I just, even though we're still struggling, and many people are, that I still believe that the world has gotten better, and I believe that the world will continue to get better, even in the face of climate change. And we will see. We will live through this. I hope to be around for a long time, so I will see. We will live through this together and see what happens. All right. Now, I want to give some good news. A story that I read about, it wasn't a published story, it was on a blog, and it was a guy that told a short story, and it made him very optimistic about the future of our environment and nature. And I would like to share that with you. This guy, I don't know where he lives, but he bought a 6-acre south-facing property. And it had been farmed for decades, and it was very degraded, and there was not much wildlife, and no frogs and butterflies and snakes and all these things. And this was 9 years ago, and he restored that. And so he knew what he was doing, and he put in some bioswales, and he said he planted 2,000 trees, and he put in 4 ponds and native plants. And so, like I said, that was 9 years ago. And the funny thing is, he actually got the local government didn't like how his yard looked, because it was not a monoculture green lawn, and he actually had to defend himself, and they finally decided that they would say that his whole yard was a garden. But let me tell you now what that property, that 6-acre property now, he explained it, and he said there are insects all over. there are monarch butterflies all over, that you're running into spider webs. He said you can hear frogs in the ponds. He sees snakes, fox, ducks, skunks, groundhogs, hawks, eagles, and too many birds to name. And I think this is a symbolic example of what we can do and our knowledge and how much nature wants to live if you make the conditions right for them. And I know the planet's warming, but I don't think it's over. And I think we have a chance to really, we have time, we have the knowledge that we can make this a harmonious planet. It's up to us. But I hope that maybe you got something on that. I think it's quite enthusiastic news. So this show won't be too long, and I know you know all about probably making ways to reduce your impact on the planet, and there are many videos about that. But I want to share you maybe just some things that you might not know that might be helpful. So let's go through this a little bit and see if we can learn something. So the first thing I want to talk about is just basic consumerism. We know that whenever you buy something, that sends a message to the business, the company, that you like this and you want, that tells them to produce more of it. So anything we buy, we are sending that message. And that is, for instance, if you don't want fossil fuels in the world, if no one bought them, then they would stop producing them. But we know at the moment that that's very hard to do. But that's the idea, that, to vote or be political in that way. Watch what you buy. If you're well off, then I can't imagine not buying energy efficient appliances and renewable energy, buying renewable energy, thinking about solar panels or wind or whatever you can. And we know really that the more money you have, the more impact you have. And so that's a responsibility of, if you make a lot of money, then you have more of a responsibility to the environment and nature. And if people that don't have very much money are not impacting the environment as much, or unless they do it in other ways, destructive ways directly to the environment. But that's another argument about developed countries helping the developing countries. So it's what you buy, a big thing. And that's with your diet and all these things. Now, I want to just give you something that you may not know, a way of looking at products and there's a thing called life cycle analysis or life cycle assessment. And this looks at the overall impact of products. It's also called cradle to grave. So it's looking at the entire entire cycle of extracting, processing, manufacturing, distributing, using, and disposing of products and its impact on the environment. And I'm sure most major companies, have look at this very, very much and try to make it as little, as least impact as they can. At least they should be doing that. But that is a very important thing. So you could, watch what you buy. If it's being transported, if something is organic, but it's being transported over long distances, then it may not be very sustainable, and it may have a lot of embodied energy, as they call it, all the energy that goes into the whole use, the whole cycle of things. And this can affect recycling and all kinds of things. So I just want to let you know that and don't. If you see a product and it says eco-friendly or something, question it. I'm not saying that they're lying, but this is the way I think we need to start thinking. And I want to mention that it's quite frustrating that given the knowledge we have, and we have students and people going into schools and getting degrees in sustainable development and sustainability and environmental science, and they can't find jobs and all that. And I just can't imagine a world now that every business and every home should have like a sustainability office. And thinking about these things all the time, energy efficiency, and all the sustainability. And that's getting better, I guess. But when I was in a city that, they had one person in the sustainability department for the whole city. But that's something I can't imagine in the future, if we're going to try to solve this, that there would be more of that. And that'd be a very integral part of even in your own home, you think of that in that way, how you can. And but every business, it's big and small, every one of them. I had a funny idea in the future, and this would be that if you had an app on your phone that could somehow quantify all the energy you use and your carbon emissions and things. And when you use, and everyone was allotted so much a day or something, and it would run out, and then you just couldn't do anything more. I don't think people would go for that too much. That's I can hear them now about controlling people. Let's move on to just some things that as individuals we can do. The next thing is something that's very easy to do, is to reuse things. Not recycle, but reuse them. That's the most efficient way and sustainable way. And that could be just buying used things, going to Goodwill, garage sales, or you know, eBay and Amazon, and you buy things like that used, but you do have the transport in that. But that's, you know, that's one way. And energy efficient appliances, another thing was definitely are worthwhile. Of course, recycle and compost. I'm sure everybody knows about that. If you have your own home, after you compost, after you recycle, after you reuse, you really shouldn't have much left of waste. Now then, look at your activities. Clearly, you know, and probably the main thing that you could do, as they say, is to just not drive, but that's hard for people. So, you know, activities, try to, I don't know, do things that have less energy use, if you can, if you want to save. And I want to talk about another thing that people may not know about, kind of a concept, and it's called the rebound effect. And to give you an example, let's say that you have a car and it gets bad gas mileage, and so you buy a car that it gets twice as much gas mileage. But then because of this, you drive twice as much. So that's what is like the rebound effect. The energy savings are offset by increased use. And this is like a really serious thing that people do that they're not aware of it. And I just wanted to mention that. Also, you could purchase green energy, obviously, and do all these things, solar panels and these things. Now, another thing that I want to, if you have a home, I wanted to mention things that are very easy to do, that can have massive savings. And it's, I don't know, I bought a house, little house, and it had no trees in the yard. And in the summer, that house heated up and got so hot, it was unbelievable. Now, you obviously shade trees, and they take a long time to grow, yes. But I planted some fast-growing trees, and it didn't take long. And the key thing is that and if you can, plant those on the west side of your house. So in the late afternoon, when it gets hot and that sun continues to beat down, that your house can get that it gets shade at that time. If you could only shade one side, that would be where you'd want to shade it, the west side of the house. And but it's amazing. My trees and all the things that I did to my little house, it allowed me to, I really didn't need to use air conditioning, even in the summer, even in hot, humid summers. I was able to, at night, I would have the windows open and fans going, and the house would cool down. And in the morning, I'd shut up the house, and because of the shade trees, it would stay cool a long time, so 5 o'clock. And so that's a way you can do it. And then, you know, these deciduous trees, they drop their leaves. And then in the winter, your house gets some sunlight so it can warm up the house a little bit. And the sun angles usually change, so the south facing gets the most in the winter. Which another thing that I did, that my little house, you can use passive heat. And I had a little porch, and somebody had glassed it in, glass enclosure that you could take on and off, and they were old single pane glass. But my house, that porch faced south, and it was great because in the winter, on sunny days, that little porch just heated up amazing. And I actually could open the windows connecting to the porch, and the heat would come into the house, and I could put a fan on, and it would just blow in heat into the house. And of course, in the summer, it's wonderful to sit in a warm, sun-heated porch. But those are some of the things that architecturally, you know, we can do so many things. It's just, you know, there is so much design that makes no sense. The design of houses that they are oriented to the street instead of nature and the sun and prevailing winds to cool your house in the summer. And architects know all this stuff, but developers come in and they don't know, and they just made these, you know, houses that they don't make any sense. They're not environmentally designed. And so we can change that, obviously. I'm not going to go on anymore, but those are just things that you can do. And obviously there's activism. And in the U.S., you know, there's some politicians coming along, and we got this Green New Deal, and it, you know, it's encouraging. You know, the thing that I mentioned Ted Turner, I like him so much, and he gave $1 billion to the UN, and he's working on renewable energy as much as he can. He's getting so old, people don't listen to him anymore. But I can, you know, this world, if philanthropy, if all the billionaires and the multimillionaires just decided that they were going to help make the world a better place, you know, with all that money that they will never be able to spend, that they've got, I mean, not all of them, and many are doing good things, I'm sure. But the wealth distribution, we know, is such an unnecessary thing that, I mean, what's the point of having money that's going to last your extended families for hundreds of years? It seems, but if they all got together and decided, you know, we're going to change the world and deal with these problems, and I mean, they could do it, I think. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And, I hope the show is helpful to you. It's helpful to me. And I'll continue making these videos for as long as I can. And these shows. And I thank you for joining me. And please stay tuned for the next episode of Living with Climate Change. Thank you for joining me. See you next time. Bye.